I want to talk today about the Dromai deck that I got first place with at my RTN this past weekend. The deck list is going to be in the description below if you want to check it out. If you want to see it with all the sideboard plans and everything, though, you're going to have to go check out my Patreon. It's $5 a month, and I will have all the sideboard guide note things there, as well as a full guide on how to play all the matchups. I got to add a few of the new decks on there. I'm probably going to try doing that this week. Anywho, let's get into the deck. Let me just explain what the deck list is and the basics, and then I'm going to go into some card choices and why I'm playing what I'm playing. So as you can see here, we're playing Dromai, we've got the Royal package, we've got Ghostly Touch for the Guardian matchup, we are playing a Big Dragon style of the deck, not the red line aggro version of the deck, and then we have a couple interesting card choices in here. And we're on the extra books plan. I want to read some books. We got 5 tomes in the deck. I'm going for max Pot of Greeds here, pretty much. I guess it's not max. We're not playing one of them. I'm trying to test that out, see if I can get away with 5, because sometimes the extra ones can clog and brick. I still like all 6 books, but it's a little bricky sometimes if you draw 2 Tome of Fiendels together and your hand's just like, this doesn't quite line up right. So let me jump around to some random thoughts on card choices and why I'm playing them. First of all is a notable exclusion to the deck of a very common card to see, Ravenous Rabble. I completely omitted that from the deck list. I ended up playing the standing orders and an extra sigil in that card slot. Rabble's still very good in the deck. That might end up coming back in my future iterations of the deck list. It's still incredibly powerful. I just didn't feel like there was any matchups that it shined in right now that I wasn't already ahead in, and that's why I wasn't playing it. Where I like it the most is Guardian and some other matchups like that, where I want to be able to like push my board with one card that isn't poppable and kind of get some good value out of my hand here, where like either it's a matchup where I want to like block with 3 cards, play Rabble, push board, or I want to have multiple go again attacks before I push my Phantasm attacks. It's great in both of those spots. I didn't feel like there was any matchups in the meta right now that I cared about other than Guardian where I was really feeling that role. And it's not like it's necessary for Guardian. The matchup's still perfectly fine with that Rabble. It's just like, yeah, that makes the matchup nice on second cycle where you can like pitch your Rabbles and then they come back around later and you get to have this nice push turn. The matchup's completely reasonable without it, and the standing orders kind of came in the place of that card. Basically, the standing orders let me kind of willy-nilly arsenal cards in the matchup, and I can sink them away. If I draw like a Remembrance too early or something like that, I can just set it and forget it and just get rid of it with the standing order. It just made the matchup more comfy. One of the things that I really like to do against fatigue style decks, this is something that I implemented after calling Charlotte, where my strategy was like way too 19 head and I mentally fatigued by the end of the event. I really like making my strategy into these decks as brain dead simple as possible. So because a lot of what's going on there is they're putting the onus on you, the not fatigue deck, to play perfectly, and if you make mistakes they can end up winning because you fumbled the ball somewhere, where their game plan is far more simple. Block, pop, whatever it may be on their side. They are playing to not lose, and that's typically much easier to implement than proactively trying to win through this block value. They're asking you a question, and then you have to answer that question perfect. So the simpler I can make that game plan into these decks, the better. The less I have to think, the more I can dedicate to my brain space to other things, and it just smooths out the consistency of that matchup. That being said, I do respect Fatigue and I respect Guardian quite a bit. I think the matchup is rather good, but I would rather make it as good as possible, so I am on the Ghostly Touch package. Honestly, it doesn't come up most of the time. A lot of your games into Guardian, you flip over your equipment, you show them the Ghostly Touch, and it signals to your opponent that's not what this game is about. They are not winning if the game goes to that point. So it forces them into a more proactive strategy, and then the Ghostly Touch just never ends up mattering. Without that, it means that they can try to fatigue you and lean into that side of the matchup. So I just like flipping it over and saying we're not doing that kind of game. And then I will try to win a proactive strategy based on my board state. We got the Chromai Dust, so we can go crazy on one of our turns. We've got a ton of Ashwing generation, so we can create this crazy board. So when we do break through, it's for a ton of damage. Also, it doubles all the Ashwing generation into the Guardian matchups. If they still decide to make the game about Ghostly Touch, all the extra Ashwing generation is fantastic for that spot. It really helps you farm those Ghostly Touch counters. And then we got the Remembrances also for that, and the Passing Mirages. The Remembrances, again, I want to make it brain dead. I don't want to have to like perfect pitch stack my Mirage guys and Chromais for this crazy round at the end of the game. It's nice being able to just throw them out, know I have these remembrances, I can get them back later. Or if the Bravo is just punching you in the mouth and they catch you on a hand that's like multiple of your pieces that are important, you can block with them and not feel like you're priced into holding this grip, because if you block with all of them, the game ends because you're out of threats. You can block with them, remembrance them back later. It's just nice to have that extra comfiness. And then the passing Mirage is to go with the Ghostly Touch. If you don't know how that works, basically you use the Mage Master Boots or some other effect like that, like either Time Snap Potion or a Time Skipper Boots, let you put the passing Mirage into play, still maintain an action point, and then you pitch another card to attack, not with that, you attack with your Ghostly Touch for approximately 1,000,000 damage. That's what the extra blue in here is for. I just have like a one of Miser blue in the deck, so that way we can kind of cycle this back into the deck during the Guardian matchup, and still have a blue in the deck for our Ghostly Touch. Technically, you don't need it. You can just go have a passing Mirage set and pitch 4 reds to cover the turn, 1 red for the Mage Master Boots, and then 3 more reds to cover your Ghostly Touch. Ideally, you would like to have a blue to do that instead, just in case they attack you and you have to block on that turn. Again, this is just a comfort thing to make it smoother. Next thing, I guess I'll touch on some of my like Arcane related things, while that is the hot topic of the week right now. I decided to go with 0 AB, but Silken form. Functions very similarly. I used the Silken form to cosplay AB1 the first time, then turn it into Nashwing. Now I have my AB1, does about the same thing. Specifically in the mirror and a couple of the other matchups, it comes up that making the Ashwing is actually really good. Getting that extra Ashwing can be the difference of clearing a full dragon in the mirror and making it so they have one less thing on their board when you pass, so they can't clear you back as efficiently. This is huge in the mirror, and against the Arcane decks, it's about the same thing. For Pheano specifically, we're on the triple Thamai, and then I have 2 Oasis and a Sand Cover. I traditionally play 4 copies of these kind of cards, the Sand Covers and Oasises. I ended up shaving 1 because I did not expect to see any Kanos in my local meta. I know that no one really plays Kano in this area, so if anyone brought it, I would have just been surprised because I've never seen them play Kano before. If I knew there was Kano players, I probably would have ended up going like 3 Oasis instead, 0 Sand Cover, maybe 1 Sand Cover, but I felt comfortable shaving 1, knowing that the preference of people in my area is not towards Kano. But just in case, I still have them in here because they're still good in like Guardian and Azalea and things like that, just to have some more defensive cards in those matchups. Speaking of Thamai has gained some new things recently that make it better. For one of the cards that everyone's going to be playing into us is Balance of Justice, and I'm playing a lot of books here. We're playing a lot of Pot of Greeds. We're going to be turning on their balance. Thamai actually turns that off. Since we have the Thamai on board, they can't activate this to draw a card if we play a tome while the Thamai's out. That's pretty cute. And then also into the KO matchup, having that in play means that they can't discard one of their agile windups on our turn to get the agility. And that comes up quite a bit when they drop a hand and they don't have that natural go again in their hand. So it can very frequently price them into rolling scabs on a turn when they really didn't want to, or they just have to discard the agile windup on their own round. That is technically more value since they get the might token, but it may not be what they wanted to do, and it means that on that turn they're playing a less aggressive hand. They're attacking you with 1 less card since they discarded it to make an agility instead. Speaking of balance, we're playing balance in the deck. I opted for this over Crown of Providence. Crown of Providence before was mostly just in the deck for like a Guardian and Assassin, in my opinion. I did play it into Dash.io. I liked it in that matchup because between it, the Furnace, and the Ironrot Gauntlets, it gave me a nice cover for when they tried throwing a max velocity at me. I could have a very easy cover on that. Like, let's say they dominate it. That's something they do a lot. I can go block 3, play a D-React from Arsenal, give you all my armor, and it covers it up nicely. We got a 12 block through all of that, and that is the breakpoint that matters there, because they'll usually use their Goliath Gauntlet on it so they can try to push through your armor. So it gets to cover that up, no boom grenade, and you're safe. Balance does the same thing in that matchup with the added text of letting us draw a card sometimes. The crown effect usually doesn't come up too much. Sometimes you'll like set a random card and then crown it away just so you can block with a new card, but really it was just there for Guardian so I could have that comfort, because one of the annoying things in that matchup would be they throw like a Command and Conquer with a pummel behind it, and you set a card that's an important piece, like a Dromai or Mirage guy or something. So just getting to give them the crown and just say, I don't want to play around it this turn, that's just a nice comfort thing. I'm currently experimenting with Crown of Dominion in the matchup instead. A lot of the other big Dromai players that are pretty well known for the deck were all telling me that was what their go-to in the matchup was. So I was like, okay, I'll mess around with it, see if I like it. It's been pretty decent. I like it. But if that's the case, then we don't need Providence anymore. And the Balance of Justice is a really nice addition for the KO matchup specifically. I am trying to play the matchup kind of defensive, so being able to like get that extra value blocking on one of their big rounds can be helpful. Still experimenting with the matchup, seeing what works, but that is something that I've tried and had some success with. Just mentioned it a second ago, Ironrot Gauntlet. We are going with these gauntlets specifically over the alternative of either Seekers or Wave of Reality, specifically again for that breakpoint, mostly against Root. I like this. Being able to throw like Ironrot Gauntlet plus a 2-block armor and 3-block from hand onto their Command and Conquer or their Send Packing is really nice. Or just having that 1 extra point of value to go 2-3 blocks and the Ironrot on one of those effects that has a Might token on top of it. Just that extra breakpoint coverage is really comfy in the matchup. I find covering the breakpoint ends up mattering more than the 1 extra point of health that wave essentially does, because you can't really control when you use it. It just happens on the first thing. And then I didn't find that Seekers was really necessary in this list. If I really need the Ash turn 0, I can just crack Mage Master Boots since we're that in every matchup. And then we got the gold in most of the matchups, so it's like technically slightly worse when you're going second in some of the matchups since you can't make the Ash turn 0, but I found it hasn't really been that impactful to the deck list. And then lastly, while we're on equipment, kind of join these things together, the Redline aggro version of the deck and Snapdragon Scalers with Snatch. I'm not playing this aggro package, and I just kind of want to touch on that. Again, I found that I didn't really want to play like an aggressive Redline aggro version of the deck. I think that a lot of the matchups right now are quite good when you're more of a defensive Dromai right now, and I didn't feel the need to just like race my opponents and hope that my deck lines up aggressively enough to outrace them. I also just don't like playing the game that way. I prefer to block and play more longer attrition oriented style of gameplay, so this is more up my alley. So I just didn't want to play that style of deck. Because of that, we're not on like Snapdragons, we're not on Snatch or any of these aggressive 2-block cards. I do think Snatch is fine in the deck just like as a standalone. My 20k list I was on Snatch and it was pretty good, but I was expecting more mirrors and more ninja. I was not expecting to see as much ninja going into this tournament, so I thought it was fine to kind of opt out of that. Being able to have those like really aggressive hands that can punish them for not being able to block efficiently is nice. That's where the snatches can come in, but I was not expecting to see too many of those. I was expecting to see a lot of like Guardian, Brute, Warrior, Dromai, things like that. Things that are perfectly fine blocking. The Snatch is still good in the mirror, obviously, since you can throw in a dragon, but I didn't think that was going to be as necessary, and I'll just let my my books kind of pull that weight there instead. The E-strikes in my list, honestly, kind of filler. They were just kind of I didn't really know what to put in that slot, so I just put like a decent 3-block. It's nice in the Azalea matchup because when you are kind of restricted to doing only one thing on your turn, it lets you just like throw a big number and push their life total down since they don't really want to block. And then once you can kind of get them in that life threshold, they start having to block. The game gets a lot easier, and it's like, you know, it's good in the Guardian matchup just as a go again, like I was talking about with Rabble. It's an overall good card. Like E-Strike isn't bad, it's just like decent at a lot of things, and where I didn't have a specific need for that card slot, I just opted for E-Strike just to kind of smooth out the consistency of the deck. It will very likely end up becoming something else in the future because I haven't decided what I need that card slot to be functioning as. But a lot of the cards in the deck and the deck construction of Dromai, they fill specific niches, so you're looking for like really tuned cards for certain roles in the deck. So I haven't quite gotten to that point of the deck list for this format, so E-Strike slapped it in, it was good enough. And the last card I think that there is to talk about here is the one of Sweeping Blow, the Miser Sweeping. It was a 2 of, and I ended up shaving it down to 1. I actually would honestly prefer that it was a blue instead, but I can't make it a blue if I'm playing these Nourishings, since you can't get the attacks out of the graveyard with Burn Them All if the attacks are not reds. Basically, I'm just playing this one Sweeping Blow into some matchups where I just need to vomit my board and just like play my engine of my deck and just win that way, because I know they can't ever overcome what I'm doing. For example, the warrior matchups frequently will be like that, where you just like keep dumping board state and they can never clear, they can't race you. So you just need to be able to consistently churn out board. Guardian will sometimes be like that too, especially when they're trying to fatigue you. So finding some spots to make a couple extra ash, really important in that matchup, so we can help fuel things like our Uvias. So it's just there to like have 2 more ash during the game. It ends up coming up a lot in these grindier matchups, so I ended up, it's just an inclusion as an engine piece. I'm not happy casting this card usually, but in the matchups that I am casting it, when I am casting it, the game isn't about that and about the value of this card. I'm winning with my board state, and I'm ending up winning by such an insurmountable amount that me going like a little negative on the sweeping isn't going to matter later. If I win the game by like over 20 points on the turn that I kill them, me going -3 on this turn just doesn't matter. I say -3 because sweeping below inherently is a below rate card. You're spending a resource on 3 damage and a full card, and generally in this deck we're pitching a red to cover this, so it's like a 2-card 3 that makes 2 ash. The rate on that is pretty bad if you're not attaching any actual value to the ash numerically. That gets muddy on how you want to like actually value the ash, but I'm just trying to explain why sweeping below is I'm calling it -3. For example, we could be playing something like Miraging Metamorph in that slot. It's a 1 for 7 that doesn't have go again. Now we're going 4 points above the value of this card. And then last thing I really want to touch on is what I actually played during the day. The matchups I played was I played against a couple Dromais, a Victor, a Bravo. I played against the same Dorinthia twice. They were an Axis Dorinthia. It was a pretty interesting build. It was kind of like a Kasai deck almost. Different hero power and different power cards. And then I played against a Kasai. I ended up going undefeated. All the matchups felt pretty good. The 2 Guardian matchups were like a little closer than I wanted them to be. I think I made a couple mistakes during those games though, of not finding spots to set a defensive card when I could have chosen to, and then that made it like a little spooky as we went into the end of the game, of like I was a little too low, and if I had sequenced things differently it would have been like very easy games, but that was on me more than the build. Now notably I didn't play against any brutes. There were a number of brutes. There were some Levias and KOs in the room. I've managed to avoid all of them. I think the matchup is very reasonable into the brutes, so I wasn't like trying to dodge them. I just happened to not run into them, but I do know at least 2 of them ended up losing to Prism and or Dromais. So notably I didn't see any KOs in the room, or K-Nos in the room, but overall I say that I ended up having a pretty favorable matchup spread. I think Warrior is a ridiculously good matchup if they're on the like double weapon builds. You just end up running them over with board state and just having such a crazy amount of stuff that you're doing. But yeah, that's the deck list. Overall, I thought the deck performed very well. I definitely would think about playing it again. Again, if you guys want to check out the deck list, it's in the description below. If you want to see the sideboard notes, check out the Patreon. If you have any questions about the deck, feel free to ask, and I'll try to get to them in the comments below. I think Dromai is a really strong pick for this meta right now. I do think that it's a little difficult navigating the brute matchups, but if you have the right game plan for it, I think you can navigate them to victory. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching.